but still a tiny spark was pulled out by remembering how this person always greeted him by name, always greeted him respectfully, always greeted him positively. That had made enough of an impression on him that it survived even as he was in this, can't even imagine the depth of evil where he was found at that moment. And every time you look at ethics of the fathers, there's always so much food for thought and for guidance. In chapter 3, I want to start by looking at the 5th statement, which technically these statements are actually called a Mishnah. If you want to be very erudite and precise, this is called a Mishnah because ethics of the fathers is part of that body of work called Mishnah. As we actually once spent 2 classes going through all of the recording of the oral law. That was a very information heavy 2 classes where we really went through everything. And if the first real formalized recording of the oral law was the Mishnah, and ethics of the fathers is part of Mishnah. 3rd chapter, the 5th Mishnah, it says, whoever takes upon himself the yoke of Torah, the yoke of government, and the yoke of worldly cares are removed from him. But whoever casts off from himself the yoke of Torah, the yoke of government, and the yoke of worldly cares are imposed on him. When we accept God's yoke, he takes away our other responsibilities. And I thought that was a very practical and of course profound concept in terms of our relationship to our lives, our relationship to God, and how we balance this all out. So has anyone here seen that? That when they prioritize God, when they put time that before was going to other pursuits into prayer, into study, when they put money into charity instead of where it was going previously, has anyone here seen that actually other things somehow, one way or another, got less pressured, less demanding, things worked out, they could put less effort and still happen? Can anyone see that in their life? This very interesting, dynamics of you're going to prioritize God, the other things will take up less space. You're not going to prioritize God? Don't worry, you'll still be equally busy. Just the other things will take up more space. Has anyone seen that in their life?
I've certainly felt it in the last year more than ever before, but it's yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like you felt that as you're giving more to God, other things that used to take up more space got easier and less demanding?
Yes, they did. Mm-hmm.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We all should feel it. Sometimes, of course, it's not so easy to see it so clearly because these things sort of morph very, subtly, a little turn here, a little turn here. But then sometimes if you just stop and look back at the whole vista, the whole landscape, you're like, wait, I used to put so much time into dealing with this or dealing with this. And now, I don't know, it just happens really fast. It just isn't such a big deal. It's what happened? Wow. Okay. I didn't realize, but there was actually a big shift. Anyone else has seen that in their own life? How as they give more to God, other things that used to take up a lot of space. What it doesn't mean here is, you used to drive yourself crazy shopping in 5 stores for your outfit, and now you realize that's silly and you just pick up something online. That's not what it means. But it could mean that it used to take you so long just to organize and get your taxes done, and now they just happen quickly. Or it used to be that every year then you'd have a problem with the IRS, and then you have to wait online 5 times and always get hung up on till you got through, till you resolved the issue. And now this year, or since you started prioritizing God, guess what? There's no issues. You do your taxes, you get back, and done. And you don't have to spend all the hours afterwards with mop-up work. That's what it means. So Robin's seen that. I definitely see it in my life. Again, I could feel I'm spending way too long doing, I always say, okay, God, this is what you want me to do with my life. No problem. I work for you. No problem. I work for you. But when you make it simpler and easier and we don't have to hassle so much, that's nice. Then I have more time for the things I would think is directly serving.
Definitely see it.
You can see that also, Danielle. Have you seen a shift over the years? Or it's just sort of always...
Oh, yes. Yes. And it's so interesting. I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about, but I think it is. I just got back on a few minutes ago. But, I used to spend a lot of time at work, and now I work fully remotely. And it just really frees up. I'm not commuting anymore. I used to do a commute. Well, when I was in the city, it was, 15 minutes. So I had a half hour a day. But then when I moved out, it was an hour each way a few times a week. And now I'm fully remote. And so I don't have any commute time at all.
That's a perfect example. That's a perfect example. Yep. God says, you're busy for me. Why should I waste 2 hours of your day every day just getting to work?
And I remember I tried to use that time in a good way, and it was really challenging for me. And so the fact that I'm not using that time where I felt like if I wasn't planned ahead of time and had something like good to listen to, like, because you can't really read when you're
Right.
driving.
Do not
so
read.
like,
Do not read. You
right.
can listen. You can talk on the phone. Those are your two options.
Exactly. And so if I wasn't prepared, it would be like, okay, well, I would use the time to maybe talk to God, but an hour, sometimes you get kind of bored. And, just to be completely honest, there'd be times where I would just turn on the radio, just have something to listen to, and have a hard time finding something that wasn't complete trash. So the fact that like, that's not even an issue for me anymore. Like, I don't have to deal with being in the car for long periods of time, really. And now if I'm in the car and my kids are with me, of course I don't turn on the radio if the kids are in the car. So, it's not a problem at all.
That's such a perfect example. And if you would go back in your head when you were commuting, and I remember when you moved there, we discussed that was definitely one part of the move, one part of the considerations. And it would be sort of like, well, that's life. Like, I mean, I have no choice. I mean, obviously I'm going to spend the rest of my life spending 2 hours a day commuting, and that's it. Then whatever, you got to earn a living. It's what God definitely wants us to do, and that's part of it. And God said, no such thing for me. No such thing.
Yeah,
I can make things easy in ways you can't imagine, but I can do it. And I think this example is just a very clear example of like, this time was spent. Guess what? God freed up 2 hours of my day 3 or 4 times a week. That's like 6-8 hours he gave me back to utilize positively. And I've definitely in totally different areas have really felt that, oh, God just sort of is taking care of that. Like, that should be a big problem. That should take a lot of time. And guess what? God just sort of said, don't worry, I have it. I'm dealing with it. So it's a beautiful thing to see. And if you haven't seen it so clearly, to watch for in your life, that as you really give more to God, he really picks up some of the other slack in ways you wouldn't even imagine. That things, like I said, just get easier, get simpler, get streamlined, take care of themselves. And just like, oh, that used to take me so long. Now, with whatever that just changed in my life, it's so fast, it's so easy, it's such a no-brainer. Right, because you're giving more time to God. So God says, you give me more time, don't worry, I'll take care of some of the other stuff that's wasting your time. And I think it's a really good, just general principle. It's a general perspective on our life. And we should always be aware that God really appreciates what we're doing. And just like we were saying at the beginning of the class before we started recording, how Robin over these past weeks, just so every class was telling her something she needed to hear, because God's aware, God cares, and God appreciates. He appreciates your sacrifice. He appreciates what you're doing for him. And therefore, he makes it work for you. He makes it work for you that you get the spiritual answers you need. He makes it work for you that other things in your life just take care of themselves because you're putting your time to him. It's, always that prayer, psalm, study, those things that take up a lot of time. And a person could say, well, of course I want to do all that for God. And I know God wants you to study. God wants you to pray. God wants you to say psalms. They're all really important, really spiritually significant. But who has the time? And like God's saying, put me in the jar first. First put in the prayer. First put in the study. First put in the psalms. And you'll see it will work out. So that was the 5th Mishnah. And I thought it was just really relevant to us and relevant to our lives. And if we haven't seen it yet, watch and maybe you'll see it. Or as life continues to morph, you'll see it more and more clearly. The 9th Mishnah, we're going to go, that was the 5th. We're going to go now to the 9th. Again, the Mishnah is how we say these unique, specific statements within these chapters, because these are chapters of the recording of the oral law, the first official formal recording of the oral law called Mishnah. Mishnah is very spiritually strong. Mishnah is actually the same letters as the Hebrew word for soul. Hebrew word for soul is neshama. Neshama and Mishnah have the same letters, just rejumbled, reconstructed, because the soul is really ignited by the study. So this study is actually really very special for the soul. And that's why it's actually something done for someone who has departed, because again, it's accessing and elevating soul. So in the 9th Mishnah, It says, anyone whose fear of sin comes before his wisdom, it precedes his wisdom will endure. But anyone whose wisdom comes before his fear of sin, his wisdom will not endure. So I thought that was also something, and there's quite a number of Mishnahs, of statements along these lines that I wanted to highlight, because I think they're really showing from the sage's perspectives how we have to prioritize a hierarchy of our service to God. So here we're comparing two things: fear of God and wisdom of God. Doesn't mean secular wisdom. It means wisdom of God. It means knowledge of God, Torah knowledge, Torah study. And it's saying that the priority has to be given to our fear of God. That has to be the foundation of our relationship. And when the fear of God precedes the wisdom of God, that wisdom of God will endure. But if the wisdom is stronger than your fear of God, the wisdom itself will not endure. The wisdom itself is going to fall apart. So what we're basically saying here is the foundation of our relationship is our fear of God. And on that strong foundation, everything else can flourish. But if we don't have that strong foundation, if it's not strong enough, then even if we're putting really beautiful bricks over it, like these beautiful bricks of Torah knowledge, bricks of prayer, it's not going to be enough. And the whole thing's just going to crumble. How do you see this in your own life? How do you express, or how do you enhance your fear of God, your relationship to God? Again, fear, for some of us in 21st century Western culture, fear is we have a hard time with that word. But it really means our nullification to God, our awareness of his authority, our nullifying ourselves to his yoke, our committing to what he wants from us, even when we don't like doing those things. All of that expresses our fear of God, awareness of his presence and responding to his presence. So anyone has found over time things that help them enhance this relationship with God, this fear of God, this nullification to God? Anyone has seen things that
for me, it's just having a reminder. I know that seems a little odd to say, because why do you need to be reminded of God? But having it throughout my house, right? So Torah books, not having a lot of distractions of the world is also helpful. So your TV being on, for example, music playing that has a lot of words or whatever, things like that, distractions for me also help. And then not only learning Torah, but also praying, like before eating. We eat a lot, right? We eat multiple times a day. So
absolutely,
that reminder before and after is really helpful.
I think those two things are two really good important points. So Danielle is saying two perspectives, both of which enhance her fear of God, and both of which I think are very practical and realistic. One, on the positives, reminders in her house of God's presence. Like she said, the holy books, which 100% is a very strong reminder. A charity box would be a reminder. Mm-hmm. Pictures could be reminders. There's all these things that are really holy, and they really change the energy of your house. The more holy books you have in your house, the energy of your house changes. Trust me, if you walk into my house, you would feel it. It is so palpable because there's so many holy books in my house. It's in the air.
It's a beautiful piece.
Open them up, learn them. That's another whole level. But just having the books already changes the air. Yep. So that's one point Danielle said. And the other point she said, which is also very, very practical, is removing those distractions from your relationship with God, like a TV, like secular music, like, all this stuff, like you mentioned before, like the radio, like all these things, which again, you're obviously not going to have something that you would know is taboo and inappropriate. So it's sort of maybe hard to find something that's okay. But even if you found something that you would say is okay, it's not godly, but it's not forbidden. But she's absolutely right. It distracts you from your relationship with God. Natanya?
Sorry, if I may just add about holy books around the house. My husband is like, actually doing it, but we have to be mindful, that we have to dress modestly, when the books are around. So I'm also, I'm letting the kids know that you have to be respectful because these are holy books and we have to be, can just run around. So we have to be, yeah, modest around the
That's
house because
true.
it's not just
That's
the books
absolutely
there,
true.
the
In
present, but
front, you
yeah,
should be modest in front of the books,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
So it's an obligation, but it also continues, like what Danielle was saying, it's a reminder that you're in God's presence.
yeah, exactly.
Seeing the books and therefore looking
Yeah,
at
the
yourself and
presence
saying,
of
wait, I
God.
shouldn't
Yeah,
say this in front of these books. I shouldn't use this language. I shouldn't be
yeah,
dressed like this. That's a very tangible reminder of your fear
yeah,
of God, of your relationship with God.
yeah.
It's always
I was
around.
gonna say, yeah, yeah. Thank you for putting it up. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you're agreeing with Danielle that those holy books really, in a very concrete way, give you a reminder of your fear of God. Anything else you found, Natanya, that works for you to be more conscious and more focused and enhance your relationship with God, your nullification to God?
I think learning Torah. I mean, attending to classes. I keep on saying, okay, although most of the time I'm busy bitching, complaining about it, but really I've noticed that almost always, actually, yeah, sorry, all the time, almost all the time that if I miss a class, even my morning class, the Tanya class, I can feel that there's a hole in my, it's like a cheesecake. I'm cheese, right? There's holes that needs to be filled in. There's a hole that needs to be filled in. So a part of me, I think, is that I'm going to class because I'm kind of fearful that, okay, if you want to feel God's presence, then God talks to you through learning Torah, and then you talk to Him through prayer. So I don't know.
Absolutely. That's exactly true. That's very true. Very, very well said. So you're almost saying you're coming to class out of fear. Fear that you're going to miss out
That's
what
part
God's
of
going to
it.
be telling you this week.
But I think I also I think I'm also working on, yeah, that's that's part of it. But mostly I want to go to a class because it's happy to be, it's happy to be, it should be happy to be in God's presence learning Torah. So I'm working on that too. God's presence, be happy.
I agree. But I think what you're saying is very true. Not that we want to, oh my gosh, I have this fear, like I'm being quote unquote punished, penalized, probably better than punished, penalized for missing out on a Torah class. But on the proactive side, I think what Atanya is saying is very true. The more we study Torah, the more we look at the world through God's glasses, if that's the appropriate way to say it. It shifts our eyesight, it shifts our mind vision. And sometimes like class after class after class, you can be like, don't I know this all by now? I mean, how complex is it anyway to be a Noahide? Don't I know all this? What did we say that I haven't already learned and thought about and heard? But it's like another drop and another drop and another drop. And drop by drop, it makes God real and the world less. which is the most foundational thing of enhancing your fear of God, is that God is real and the world is not. And as you study, God's more real, and God's more real, and God's more real, and God's more real. And this lessens the grip the world has. Of course, as Noahide, you're very enmeshed in the world. That's obviously part of the job of being a Noahide. But you want to be enmeshed in the world while at the same time not being fooled by it. Engage with the world while knowing the truth, that it's all God. It's all a manifestation of God. And your job is to interact with it and actually pull out that God energy in world by interacting in the world as a Noahide, as who you are. Anyone else? So I think what Danielle said was really practical, and Natanya. Anyone else have any of their pointers for how they enhance their nullification to God, fear of God, relationship with God? These were really good ideas, very practical. And again, to keep in mind that there's this dynamic relationship between your knowledge and your foundational nullification to God. And what we're being taught here is, if this is just, which of course it's not for any of you, but if this will be like a more academic pursuit, like this is interesting stuff, this is engaging, this is fascinating, this is stimulating, blah, 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 but not this is God, then it's going to disintegrate. It's not real. The foundation, more important than your study, is your relationship with God. Though, as Natanya said, and I agree with her, the more you study, the more you have that relationship with God. So there's obviously a dynamic interaction between fear of God and study. The more you study, the more you fear God. That's true. But we have to start with this foundation of fear of God. And then as we study and get closer to God, it's all stemming from that foundational relationship. And hopefully the study enhances that fear of God. And hopefully the more I fear God, the more I study. So each one feeds off the other. I fear God more, then I study more. The more I study, the more I'm sensitized to God's presence. The more I'm sensitized to God's presence, the more I'm going to study. So it's this spiraling effect of each one really helping the other in terms of a really healthy, beautiful relationship with God. And similarly, that was the 9th Mishnah. The 10th Mishnah is focusing on, so the 9th one was talking about fear of God, knowledge, wisdom. Now we're going to talk about action versus knowledge, and also in a very similar way. Anyone whose good deeds exceed his wisdom of God, his wisdom will endure. But anyone whose wisdom exceeds his good deeds, wisdom will not endure. There are a few other parts to this Mishnah, but we're going to start with this one. So again, just as we spoke before of fear of God and wisdom, knowledge, now we're talking about action versus knowledge. And there's a relationship in our own life between how much we're doing for God and how much we learn and study. And what we're being told here very strongly is we always have to be making sure our actions are even greater than our knowledge. Now, I totally agree with what Natanya said before. Knowledge is a critical thing. And the more we study, the more we understand, the more we're connected, the more we fear. So it's very, very important and wonderful to study. But you always have to make sure you're doing even more. Now, that shouldn't be too difficult, but sometimes as a Noahide, things might get in the way. You might get distracted, and you might stop the doing. What's the doing of a Noahide? What do you do on a daily basis that expresses your relationship with God?
Pray.
You prayer, absolutely. Prayer should be a daily thing for every one of you. What else do you do as a Noahide? There's a lot of things as a Noahide you refrain from, but what do you do as a Noahide on a daily basis?
God, every day, the first thing I get up in the morning, Modiani. I also, everything I do, everything, whether I cook breakfast, which I don't do anymore because Jack's not here, but I thank him for my breath to breathe. I thank him, everything I thank him for. I can honestly say I'm so grateful. I thank him for my home. I thank him that I've got legs to walk on. I thank him when I'm working. I thank him that I have hands and fingers to work with. I thank him I try and thank him every minute of the day, which of course I can't. And there's times I forget, but he's in Shaviti Adonai Eloheinu. He's in front of me at all the time.
That is amazing. And what Dixie is saying is a wonderful way that she never is not actively serving, because she's talking to God all day long, and she's not only talking to him, which is, we would call it prayer, but she's thanking him. She's acknowledging the blessings in her life. That's a beautiful way, minute by minute, to make sure you are serving God. I love that. So we've got prayer, we've got gratitude, acknowledging God, constant acknowledgement of God. What else do you do on a daily basis as a Noahide for God? Danielle was speaking before about the blessings before and after eating. Charity you can give every day. Psalms you could say every day. What else, and what other way do you see the details of your life are actions expressed in your relationship with God? How are those details different because you're a Noahide? How does it impact the details of your life?
I make sure that, I talk to my kids, how's their day, sit down to them. Although they talk most of the time, but it's okay. I mean, that's how I want them to make them feel that they're being, valued and listened to. So yeah, and it's nice to know that, especially for my eldest, that he feels home, he's like, sorry. Yeah, he said that he really appreciates, me listening to him. Although before, I mean, try to make that commitment is really, tough, to to listen to him for, 20, 30
Absolutely.
minutes at a time. But um him saying that, it means a lot to me that, that he sees me now as growing up, that I was like a good listener, and I feel home and I feel safe. So yeah, the
Yeah,
family
that's
for sure.
really beautiful, Natanya. And I agree with you. That's a beautiful way as a Noahide, when you're raising your children and you're educating them and you're helping them flower and grow up to be the next generation of Noahides, that's definitely serving God. I definitely say the same thing for myself. The time I spend with my children, helping my children feel good about themselves and good about their relationship with God, that's all serving God. That's all proactively serving God. Nurturing your children as you raise them as Noahides is definitely a service of God. As Danielle said before, as she hears Torah all day because her husband is teaching her kids. So, she's gaining an education in the process. So that's absolutely. So we have prayer, we have charity, we have thanking God, being aware of his presence blow by blow, minute by minute. We have nurturing our own children and helping them develop themselves as Noahides. Anything else? That's always said the blessings before and after eating. Anyone else? Anything else that you could think about sort of on a daily basis, concrete actions in your life that really express your relationship with God?
I can say, um, how do I want to say this? Everything that happens, I thank God for, even when it's bad. I was going to take bread to my neighbors, like I do I make extra Shabbat bread so I can take it to the neighbors. And I went out to get in the truck, and I had left the key on. It's dead. I left the key on Friday. And it's like, oh, well, I guess I don't take bread to the neighbors. I'll call somebody to start. So I went to get my bug out, but my four-wheeler's behind the bug. And the bug's dead, or the four-wheeler's dead. And so it's like, oops, I'm not going to the neighbors today. So, and then God sends a blessing, a miracle, whatever you want to say. A friend I haven't seen for probably close to a year, they stopped by to visit a second because they'd been here to the roping. And he jumped the truck and the bug for me.
You got
and it's
both
like,
right.
it didn't upset me a bit at all. And Rabbi Moshe had called and he said, how's your day going? And this is before I got him started. And I said, well, I left the key on the truck and I left the car won't start. But I said, other than that, it's absolutely great. He said, you know what? I don't understand your attitude. He said, you have the most amazing attitude. Most people would be mad because they couldn't get their truck going and the four-wheeler. I said, why? Why be mad? There's something better in store. I'm supposed to stay here, I guess. But that's the way I don't know. Things just don't bother me anymore because God's in control. If he wants me to go give the bread away, I'll go. If he doesn't, I won't.
So that perspective. So now you're getting into, as a Noahide, and this is what we were discussing last week, there's a lot of spiritual depth that you can attain. Doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen for anyone overnight.
No, it doesn't.
He's been working on her relationship for many years with action, with self-sacrifice, with study. But no, that's possible. Like you could blow by blow, minute by minute, be seeing your world through the prism of thank you, God. And the more God is so real, it's not just lip service. You're really, really feeling the gratitude to him every step, every breath. So then you also feel that everything that happens is him. Everything that happens is good. Everything that happens is for a purpose. Can a Noahide attain such a deep relationship with God? Yes. That is the unbelievable thing a Noahide can. A Noahide can believe that deeply that, as Dixie is saying, the trust, which we discussed last week, the trust can be that strong That the car doesn't start, God, I trust you on this one. This is your will. This is all good. Oh, my other truck's no problem, God. It's clearly you. It's your will. It's what you want. No problem. You run the world. I'm going on your, on your wagon. Wherever you want, that's where you're leading me. That
And then you send somebody to do it.
exactly. And maybe it was all just to express that deep sense of trust. That trust comes from working on the muscle of trust and prayer and study and doing all the actions of the Noahide. And you deepen and deepen, you pull from such a deep reservoir, deeper than you thought you could possess, of a love of God, of a fear of God, of a belief of God, and of a trust in God. So that was the first part of the Mishnah. He continues to say, you know what? I think because it's already 8:15. Well, we're not going to do what he continues to say here because I did have a few other ones I wanted to touch on. So we're going to go to 12. I thought this was really nice to focus on this idea of 12. Be submissive to a superior, warm to a younger person, and receive every person cheerfully. Receive every person with joy. I thought that specifically that last part I really wanted to focus on. Greet everyone with joy. Now, what we're looking at here is called ethics of the father. Ethics of the fathers are really giving morals, ethics, religious values beyond the letter of the law, beyond what the law dictates you must do. This is what will be really nice to do, advisable to do, admirable to do. So it's interesting because this is written here as a high-level religious value. Greet everyone with joy. This seems easy. We're also being told here it's a very great virtue because it's an ethics of the fathers. Has anyone here tried to focus on this easy and great virtue?
Yes.
Greeting people with joy. Robin, have you seen a difference when you focus on it?
Yes. So I work at Neiman Marcus, Nordstrom in a big beauty department, and there's 50 women for sure, and all different kinds of people and backgrounds. And I have focused on it the last 6 months to change relationships and change how maybe I'm seen or I feel, just by how I greet everyone, and I look at them kindly and nicely. And it's changed the relationships where maybe they didn't speak to me very much, or, we didn't have, for no reason, just we didn't see, eye to eye, or we're the same. But so I have focused on it because I wanted to change all my relationships within the department.
And you see how it's made a difference.
It's made a very big difference. Everyone now they greet me with a beautiful smiling hello or just a smile. And they, I can help them and they will help me. And it's just much more pleasant all the way around. It's beautiful.
That's nice.
And I do that with, what my goals are each day. I just say, okay, Hashem, here we go. I'm going to work and this is what I need. And so, and it always comes out to be.
That's beautiful, Robin. So Robin said she spent about 6 months working on this. And she sees how it's completely transformed relationships. Really, really, really special. Now, Danielle said, yes, she's worked on this as well. Anyone else has focused on this? Because it's a religious value, is what God wants. At the same time, as Robin's stating, it's like everything is when you serve God. It's so good for you to be that person. It just all comes back to you as you focus on others and give others that joy and positive sense.
I've got one almost in the reverse.
Yeah.
I was in college. I got this brilliant idea that if you're passing somebody in the hallway or something and they ask, how's your day going? And you say good, and it's not good, that's not a good idea to lie. And you should be like, oh man, I'm having a really bad day. And like, be honest with them. And I did that for a few months and it was terrible. I was even more miserable. Because I was always like, oh, it's just, this year. And so these days, like, even if I'm having a bad day, my friends know that I usually will make like a joke out of it. Like it's tell the bad day as a funny story. Because then even your worst day is funny.
Positive, you
Learn
can
that
laugh.
lesson the hard way.
Laughing is always good.
Much better, yeah, like you said, because even if you take that bad day and you interact with other people in a joyful way, then they're not feeling like you're complaining or something about a bad day. Why
do you think, let's focus on this for a second. Why do you think this is a religious value? So Robin says it's improved her relationships with people, and Natalie didn't say, but I don't know how many people started avoiding her in the halls when they knew they were gonna get, they didn't really want to hear it. They didn't really need it. They weren't really interested, to be honest. What's the religious value in this? What's the God value in this? Why does God want you to do this?
Is this one of those things where this is how we want our relationship to be with God, so this is how we need to have our person-to-person relationships?
So that's definitely one way of looking at it. I try to make a point, even this is a little thing. Maybe I'm not haven't been perfect on it lately, but there was a time when I was really super focused. When you're in like a store or, talking on the phone, someone, and, they say their name and blah, blah, blah. I try to remember the name and later in the conversation, use it. Or in a store, I try to use their name, to give this person a sense of you're a human being. You're a person. You have a name. You're not just this, voice or faceless, whatever. No, you're real. You're valued as a person. So definitely what Natalie is saying is true. It definitely is going to create the ripple effects of how God treats us. Any other ideas of why this is a religious value? Why God wants us to greet others with joy? Why that's part of serving God?
To spread joy, to be, I don't know how else other to say it. It's not really the right term, but a good example, wow, she's so joyous and kind, and, she loves God and fears God, and I want to be like that.
I think both, so Danielle just said two things. I think both of them are very true. First thing she said is because God wants his world to be a joyous, positive world. And as we greet someone else with joy, with a smile, happily saying their name, giving them attention, giving them the sense that they're important, giving them the sense that there's positivity in the world, that just spreads more joy. It's contagious, exactly as Robin said. As she did it for 6 months, now people naturally do it to her. Of course, she continues doing it, and they do it in it. She's changed the whole atmosphere of that department of Nordstrom's. So it's creating a world where there's positivity, where God's creatures, where man is joyous and happy and sees good in life. For sure, that's something God wants. And then Danielle said something else as well, very significant, which is every one of us is a billboard. We're a billboard for God. You act, and people will be like, wow, I want what she has. She has this relationship with God, and I see she's positive, she's happy, she's warm, she's friendly, she's kind, she's considerate. I want some of that. How do you get some of that? But conversely, if you're walking around with, the world's burdens on your shoulders and you're sort of slumped over and depressed, and you want to be really honest like Natalie and just tell everyone all the miseries that happened to you in the last hour and a half, and people are like, oh wow, that's someone who's connected to God. I think I'm not interested in that. So absolutely, and in everything we do, we have that obligation, that awareness, that responsibility that we're God's billboard. Literally, we're his billboard. You can say nobody knows. Fine. So for the 5 people that know, you're God's billboard. And if you know 5 know, probably another 20 also know, because people talk. So for those people, you're God's billboard. And how you look, how positive you look, that's God's billboard. That's attracting people to God. So I think everything said so far for sure are reasons why God wants us to greet people with joy. And it's doable. And it only comes back to benefit us. It only, like Robin says, enhances the relationships. It might take a while. But it does enhance relationships. I remember once mentioning this story. We were talking about this idea in a previous class of a man who made this a point in his just one of the things he was very careful of was he always greeted everyone respectfully, by name, positively, like everyone. He was like the rabbi of a town, and he always greeted everyone with that, here he was a very important person in his little town, but he always greeted everyone as if they were important and significant to him. This was the Holocaust broke out, and he eventually wound up in some concentration camp. And as he's in the line of the concentration of the, and came out of the cattle cars, and he's a smart person, because usually they were so disoriented, like he barely knew it was flying till it was happened. But he got the scope of the land very well, and he sees there's this person there, and he's indicating to the right, to the left, and the young people, the people that look like they could still work, they get sent to one direction, and the old and the very young and the mothers with children hanging on to them, they all get sent to the other direction. He understood what was going on. And he's thinking to himself, what type of person could be so callous to the value of life that he could just, with a flick of his hand, sentence second by second more and more and more people to death. And as he's started studying, he already understood for himself he was going to go to the side of death. He was already older, so he understood, he saw people his age where they were going. He lived, served God. This is God's world, but he was like studying this person. Who is this person that could be doing this? And as he's looking at this, person there, he recognized him, and he realized he was the mailman of his town, the mailman, that little nobody, suddenly had become this villain of evil, bringing so many people to death. And he composed himself. And when he came right in front of him, where he was barely looking at him, and he knew where he was going because he knew his age, he already understood that, but he greeted him like he greeted him every morning when he would deliver his mail, by name, looking at him in the eye, like he did in his town. And without the man even looking up, he responded, Herr Rabbiner, Mr. Rabbi, as he always did, and sent him to the side of life. And he survived the war. Wow. It was just a very dramatic expression of this value, even of someone who had fallen to such depth of evil. But still a tiny spark was pulled out by remembering how this person always greeted him by name, always greeted him respectfully, always greeted him positively. That had made enough of an impression on him that it survived even as he was in this, can't even imagine the depth of evil where he was found at that moment. It's so doable. It's just like Danielle said before about fear of God. And she said about fear of God, it's sort of strange to say, but I just need to make sure I remember. And she's so right, because we're so human and we're so distractible. And how many times do you go into a room to get something and then have no clue why you went into that room and what you were coming to get? Or pick up the phone to call someone, and then when they answer, you don't remember what you wanted to tell them. Like, we're so distractible. We've got so many things flying at us constantly. We're bombarded by so much stimuli. So the hard thing is to stay focused, to remember. So, write sticky notes and put it all over your house or your phone or but just to really remember the value and prioritize it. And who knows? You're God's billboard. You're spreading joy in this world. You're treating others exactly as going to be reflected as God will be able to treat you. So there's so many spiritual reasons why this is so significant. Anyone else have any other thoughts on why this would be a godly virtue? Why God would want you to do this?
Reminded of what I had read in a book way back in the day, that the most beautiful word or sound to any person in any language is their own name.
It's good for us to remember and to use it, especially with people who become gray, anonymous. Like on your computer screen, those things that are those icons that are grayed out and you can't use them. So, like there's a world of people servicing that are just like become invisible. They're there, we're interacting with them, but they're invisible. And when we use their name, we're saying, oh, you're a person. You're a person. You're real. You're not invisible. It's a very powerful message to give another human being. And every human being is a creation of God. Every human being is precious to God. And when we treat another person with joy and respect and positivity, we're appreciating a creation of God. We're appreciating God's handiwork. And as Natanya said, absolutely. Where there's joy, that's where God can be found. As we create a world of joy, we're creating a world more and more and more hospitable to God. About 5 ideas. So hopefully take 1, take 5. But if you walk away with even 1 concrete idea in your back pocket, whatever it is, in any of the areas we discussed in terms of acceptance of the yoke of God, and how truly things in your life have gotten easier as you prioritize God more, your nullification to God, your actions versus your knowledge, you're greeting people with joy, whatever the ones are that work for you, take them and lead a little bit of a different week or a lot different week because of them. And you should see that God is more and more and more in your life. And then you could be like Dixie and every second see him, every second thank him, every second acknowledge him, and nothing's going to throw you because you have such strong trust like iron. It's all God. It's all good. Thank you so much.